I'm sure everybody here in the room knows what's Industry 4.0, so we won't really get into introduction. But maybe we should turn to the players who are actually making it happen. And which better company to represent India and Industry 4.0 than Tata Consultancy Services, the jewel of the Tata crown, if I can say it. Definitely the most profitable company in the group today. And so I'll hand over the floor to Amit Bajaj, the CEO of Tata Consultancy here in Europe, to explain what Industry 4.0 in India would mean and what that could mean for India and Europe.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we at TCS firmly believe that default is digital, and the future of our society, of our businesses, is being fundamentally changed, reimagined by the digital technologies, which are at the foundation of, I would say, Industry 4.0. And just to bring up, digital is a very broad word. But the way we look at it is a combination of pervasive contextual data combined with connectedness, combined with very low cost computing. Right? When you put all these three together, it releases enormous power, using which every part of an organization and society can be reimagined. TCS is working with over 300 companies worldwide, also in Europe, to undertake what we call digital reimagination, which is fundamentally looking at every part of what we do, whether it is in business, it is with employees, it is with customers, it is in society at large. How these digital technologies can help reimagine the way we do things. We also conducted a study among the European organizations, and it is quite interesting. Despite all the perceptions, European companies, especially coming from France and Germany and Sweden, are investing by far the most, at least in one part of digital, which is around artificial intelligence. It is a study that we've done recently and will be shortly releasing. So despite all the commentary around potentially Europe lagging behind in this wave, we do believe that European companies are taking quite a lead in defining and using digital and Industry 4.0. I also feel both from a technology as well as innovation standpoint, there is a lot to be gained in collaboration between India and Europe. India can benefit a lot from the innovation and the technology that is being pioneered in Europe. India also presents a huge opportunity. Mr. Modi's vision of Digital India presents huge opportunities for European companies. Indian companies bring a lot of investments. TCS, for example, we are investing over €500 million every year in incubating digital, in learning, in R&D, in development. So there's a lot of focus, and that can be combined with the focus that European companies have to create a win-win combination. So I would say, as we said, digital is default. In that context, a very important part of digital is around the ecosystem. And very central to ecosystem is collaboration. So collaboration has to be default in driving the reimagination process. No one company can do it alone. and the ecosystem thinking and collaborative approach is extremely important to unlock the opportunities. Thank you.
That's quite to the point and very precise. Just one question on it. If you could perhaps maybe just highlight some changes that are happening in India, where the digital or the default is coming, and in the industry, how it's really changing the way we work.
I think it's one example that is quite close to at least my heart is how TCS is working with the education sector in India, right? You know, the education sector, the whole examination process, and we have lots of them. It has been a very physical format for a number of years, and there are a lot of issues with the physical format. For those who may not be familiar, in India, you know, pretty much the evaluation process or the entrance examination for schools, for colleges, for engineering, for jobs, banking jobs, all the government jobs, there is a quite rigorous evaluation process and written exams, etc. And we have used the digital technologies to completely digitize that whole process, and it impacts 200 million people that are going through this evaluation process. And think about it, that the whole assessment process used to take anywhere between 3 to 4 months. You go through the assessment, it goes to examiners, from the question paper setting to actual person taking the examination to assessments and all of that. 4 months, and we've digitized the whole thing. And now someone goes to take the assessment, and within 2 hours, the assessment result is out. So, huge transformation of the whole education field. We've done the same thing with Passport Seva, the whole transformation of passport services. So I would say like that in every field, there is a huge impact to be created.
Thanks for those examples. Maybe I could now turn to Mr. Quinn de Luis, Chief Economist of BNP Paribas Fortis, in a way also our host in this magnificent auditorium today. Thank you very much for that. So I would like to speak, and then I'd like to throw a question.
Thank you. I was asked here to bring in a little bit of macroeconomic view on the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm going to do that a little bit in general. So if you look at the fourth industrial revolution, what did it bring us? Well, what kind of challenges are we seeing? What kind of opportunities are we seeing? I think there are huge opportunities, and I think there are huge challenges. But if we look around us, and if we look to the environment, and we see everything changing around us very, very fast, then it's amazing that we don't see anything in the macroeconomic figures. Certainly in Europe, near in the United States, okay, in India you still have quite some productivity gains, but here in Europe you don't see any productivity gains. Here, if you see to the productivity over the last 10 years, you see that productivity is hovering around 0 to 0.5%, and that is a problem for Western companies, certainly because you have the aging problem as well, and growth is the sum of population growth and productivity growth. So how come that we don't see any productivity growth? I just want to go in that very, very briefly. First of all, I think there are measurement issues. If you have a smartphone today, if you compare it with the smartphone of 2 years ago, it's a huge improvement, but that quality adjustment doesn't come out in the GDP, and that holds GDP down. That is one thing. But the most important thing, I think, is that we have in this fourth industrial revolution, compared to the first and the second, is that we have some kind of a product innovation instead of a process innovation. And with the product innovation, you have new products, better products. Smartphones are very handy tools, and it brings a consumer surplus. But with the process innovation, you have a producer surplus, and you produce more products, and you have something additional in your GDP. And so that was the case in the first and second industrial revolution, a process innovation. Now you have a product innovation. But I think the process innovation is still to come. Internet of Things, I think all industrial companies will have to face it. All industrial companies will have to introduce it. Third of all, I think the prospects of productivity gains is still there to come. If we look to the first industrial and second industrial revolution, if you look to the invention of electricity, electricity was invented in 1880. If you look to the introduction of electricity in companies, that was only around 1920. And at that moment, you started to have mass production and things like that. Now, that is a macroeconomic view. If we go to companies, if we go to the company level and we see what kind of changes we are seeing there, I'd just like to share for a moment a survey that I did with the 50 biggest Belgian stock-quoted companies, because I'm writing a book on the fourth industrial revolution, and I asked to them, okay, what kind of challenges, what kind of opportunities do you see with this, with this change, with this digitalization? And I'm not gonna share them all, because otherwise you don't buy my book anymore, but I just wanted to share the most important ones. And I think the most important one is that all of these companies said, okay, it brings huge opportunities, but only 1 in 3 said it is a threat. And I think that's very strange, because if we see the online economy, what kind of an impact it had on the music industry, if you see what kind of impact it had on the traveling industry, yeah, it was huge. If you see e-commerce, what kind of an impact that it has on the retail industry, just have to look to the stock prices of Amazon versus, let's say, Walmart, minus 20% since beginning of 2015, Macy's minus 30%, Gap minus 40%, Amazon plus 150%. So there are huge challenges. As well in the sharing economy, huge challenges there. Uber is changing the taxi industry. You see as well, Airbnb is changing totally the hotel industry. So there are huge changes, and it's pretty strange then that the companies don't see this as a threat. From the other side, if I ask them, okay, what are the 2 most important things that you see that will start to change? And they said, first of all, we will have to listen more to the customers. Customer centricity instead of product centricity. We at the bank do the same thing. Here is a good product, you have to buy it. Okay, now it's not going to be the other way around. I want that product, so you have to give me that product. And that's not only with the banks, it's with all the companies. And the second thing is that, okay, there will be 50% of the respondents said, okay, there will be new competition. And I think that is very important. You have a lot of competition coming from out of nowhere. Because the only thing that you need today in this digitalized, it's a very difficult word, in this world, is an app. And if you have that application, then you can start to compete with other companies. Then one last thing is that when I was comparing the service companies with the industrial companies, the service companies were ready. They had implemented things. Industrial companies, they were not ready at all. And I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake, because I think Internet of Things is going to come and is going to conquer the world and is going to bring, I think, these productivity gains that we didn't see yet. Now, just one word about the financial companies, and like that I give the floor again to the other people. I think there are huge challenges and huge opportunities. When we look to the financial companies, the huge challenges is the upcoming fintechs. We have new competitors. Now, I think we have things that we do better than these fintechs, and they do things better than we do. We are very good in, for example, know your customer, compliance, trust, rules. We know everything about regulation. We know how to handle it. They don't. But what are they very good at? They're very good in technology. They're very agile. They have a social network. Maybe you have a company where there's just 10 people are working, but during the night, some other information nerds, they don't know what to do. They start to work on that certain app, and all of a sudden you have 200 additional people that are working for free on your app. And if we combine, we as a bank, with our knowledge, with the knowledge of these technology companies, then I think we have a very great future ahead of us. Thank you.
Thanks, that's really interesting. And maybe one small question to you, quite soon.
What do you think the role played by the financial, especially the banks, in promoting Industry 4.0, has it been adequate in terms of making finance available or going forward? Or has that been driven by other financial sources? The role played by the established banks like BNP Paribas in promoting Industry 4.0 in IoT? In financing, yeah.
Financing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we do our best. I think we do our best. The problem is not today that we don't give any loans, if that is what you mean. The problem is that there is not too much demand, and that is a vicious circle that is playing. A vicious circle because we have very low growth. Because we have very low growth, there is not too much confidence of the business. Because there's not too much confidence, there is not a lot of investments, and so I think. I don't know whether that is your question, but I think ECB with its policy is pushing our string for the moment, trying to put a lot of money to us, and we giving it to, or we handing it over to the companies. Well, you can bring, like they say, you can bring the horse to the water, but you can't push it to drink. So, and that is a little bit the problem that we see now.
Thanks a lot. Now I'll turn to Mr. Lars Willik Farsbrook of DG Connect from the European Commission, to give his views on Industry 4.0 and India.
Okay, thank you very much. Just very quickly, because we're talking about Industry 4.0, which for me is the German term, we call it the digitalization of industry, which is a common word for a difficult word. Simply saying, we in the European Commission, in the European Union, what we're trying to do is to coordinate and to see to it that member states can actually, because they all are inventing their own digitalization policy. So Germany has 4.0, in most of the member states. Now, to exchange and to try to build common approaches and ideas, we are acting on that. And this digitalization of industry is a part of a larger package which you might have heard of, which is the digital single market, one of the European Commission's main priorities, Juncker's priorities. Now, this initiative now is taking form next to also when we presented the digitalization of industry package in last spring. We also, and that is an issue which I think was going to be touched upon later, is employment. How do we actually see to it that once we have this revolution, we will still keep up with employment in the European Union? So one of the issues which is accompanying the digitalization of industry package is also a skills agenda, where we work closely, of course, like we always do with industry. There is a grand coalition for digital skills, which we have had for quite a while. There's a new agenda also in employment, particularly on digital skills. So these are issues that are connected with one another. Of course, you also have the governance part of it. So again, the European Commission has no own policy on it, but what we do, we try to coordinate the member states on this. So on e-governance, it's a matter of trying to see to it that the European Union acts as one, and that we actually have cross-border fertilization and that systems that are built up between the different member states, or in the different member states, actually functions between one another. Including issues like business registries, legal issues that comes up, etc., etc. So there's a whole agenda there too, which accompanies this. Of course, digitalization of industry, the whole concept of Internet of Things, the future, 5G, etc., etc. I cannot live without also putting a lot of emphasis on building out infrastructures. So the European Union is also putting a lot of emphasis now on trying to see to it that basically every man in the European Union and every company in the European Union has enough megabytes to be able to correspond to what we need in the future. Of course, there also you have the whole aspect about data flows, which is a big matter together with a number of other countries. Of course, we have the United States on another side where data flows is extremely important because they are much leading on big data, of course. Now, how do we see India in this perspective then from a governmental issue? We have a long-standing good cooperation with India through what we call the ICT dialogue, which happens once a year and which has a number of video conferences in between. So we meet once a year, then we have video conferences in between. That is trying to set up a number of goals and ideas, what we can cooperate on. I would like to mention a few of them. Of course, there's been a lot of discussions about 5G, and of course, 5G and the development of 5G is industry-led. And in the European Union, we share very much the idea of some other countries, some of the leading countries in the world on the development of 5G, that 5G is not about 4G plus, but it is 5G that actually can correspond to Internet of Things in the future, that connect mainly everything. Also, again, coming back to the digitalization of industry, that we actually think about the verticals. Car industry, for instance, how do you get automated cars into this perspective? That, again, 5G has a major role to play. How do we develop the electronic communication in the future? Now, these are issues that we discuss with the Indians. It's industry-led, as I said, but we are trying to push and help a little bit from behind, if I may say so. We have ongoing projects with India. I think the major and the most interesting one is an ongoing project between EICC, our standardizational body, together with Indian ICT standard body, which is TSI, which is a relatively new story, and it's a good cooperation because EICC is there to see to it that India adopts international standards, because this is what we need. We need international standards, and if we are for free trade, this is what we actually absolutely need to avoid. Of course, technical barriers to trade and non-tariff barriers to trade. We also, and I think that is a very nice initiative which happened just a couple of weeks ago, startup. The European Union have had a startup initiative for quite a while, where startups in our field is meeting, exchanging information, exchanging understanding, ideas, thoughts. How do you drive business? How do you make business function better in the future? And how do you capitalize on your knowledge? Now, India has just adopted also its policy on startups. So a couple of weeks ago in Bangalore, there was a big get-together between startups, European startups and Indian startups, and there was a fantastic exchange of ideas between the two ecosystems. And I think we are doing that a little bit to correspond to what we need to see in the future. We need to see much stronger cooperation with India from the European Union. We need much more cooperation with other countries, and we cannot only focus on Silicon Valley. I think that's how I would like to end. Thank you.
Just one thing to ask, how real is the threat that we may actually see a multi-speed Europe even in digitalization? A multi-speed Europe.
Of course, this is a very real issue for us, obviously. I mean, if you look at countries like my own, Sweden, and some of the northern, this country also, Belgium, is very well situated in the digitalization of industry and the build-up of infrastructures. Of course, it's a big difference between us up north, I would call it, and the countries, some of the countries in the south. It doesn't always correspond to the south, because you have countries like Romania, for instance, which is doing, wavelength work on trying to actually catch up. Also, you should know that the European Union as such is, of course, putting a lot of emphasis in helping to build out broadband in some of the countries which are lagging behind. through our regional funds, structural funds. So that's some ideas that we have. We've also, what we've done is we try to make countries compete with one another a little bit from the European Commission. So what we have is something called the DESI, which is information about where different countries stand on digitalization. To actually just simply show to some countries that you're lagging behind. It's an old technique from the European Commission where we're trying to make people understand that they have to move. But it is, of course, it's a challenge, it's an everlasting challenge. There are some countries which, as I said, which are very well ahead, which has the industry, which has the knowledge, which has hubs, innovation hubs, which have mini signal valleys, which exist also in the European Union. And some other countries are not on that way. So I think it really very much starts in the schools. And now I'm going to be critical to Belgium because I live in Belgium. And my wife is a school teacher. But if you look into, for instance, schools in my own country, all kids have today a computer. In Belgium, I'm sorry to say it, but maybe there's something that has to be done about it. There is no computers in school, or you have these computers where the teacher can draw on the computer, and then there is a big screen behind. In her school, there are two of these screens. So, I mean, it is a question about going from the scratch, and that's, I think, this is the role of governments. Not maybe the Commission only, but of course governments. Governments have to take that step and think about the future. And the digital skills, the digital literacy amongst people is definitely nothing that we should underestimate. It's something which is extremely important.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll have to excuse Mr. Bajaj. So thank you very much for your intervention here. You talked of digital skills, and that's exactly the topic that Mr. Ravi Parsati will be talking about, and how skills would be in the robotics world and in the industry 4.0 that as we know it.
Chairman Adotra, Director General Sunil, participants, my friend Baron Merrick, ladies and gentlemen. In this session on 4.0, I want to touch upon a complementary subject, which is the challenge of unemployment, which is a direct outcome, I believe, of very good progress that we are making in making life more comfortable for mostly the elite. And I think this is going to be an emerging issue for both India and the EU. And I believe there's a need for the political leadership and the corporate leadership to recognize and give an effective response to a very rapidly changing economic, social and demographic landscape. But first I'd like to make a minor digression to global warming. And I'm doing this for a purpose because it was as far back as 1896 that the Swedish scientist, Dr. Arrhenius, first formulated a link between fossil burning and temperature, and also did a link between atmospheric carbon dioxide and temperature. But through much of the 20th century, there was very little debate on the subject because the environmental skeptics effectively stifled all cogent debate. It was only in 2006 that Vice President Al Gore produced a compelling documentary which foresaw traumatic climate change. And in the last few years, we have witnessed unprecedented floods in some areas, droughts in other areas, and an inexorable rise in global temperatures. And it was only as recently as in September this year that the US and China ratified the Global Protocol on Climate Change, first proposed in COP21. But what is notable is that while it took 120 years for the US and China to make a move, which effectively is a tipping point in the battle against climate change, well before a global framework was enunciated in COP21, leading corporates started making the necessary changes. Some examined their carbon footprint to determine how to become carbon neutral. Others increased the use of renewable energy and even built green buildings to make a contribution, notwithstanding the higher costs. I think we need to grapple issues relating to mass unemployment stemming from robotics with a far greater sense of urgency than we have done in the case of a similar global challenge like climate change. Improvements in robotics have certainly enhanced process efficiency, as Amit said. They've enhanced productivity in medical and health. But there is perhaps a greater need for awareness of societal issues, and ideally, as was in the case of global warming, I think it will be necessary for leading corporates and governments and even regional authorities to address what the implications are of AI for their own organization, as well as the larger community of stakeholders that they represent or interact with. The problem is there has been a proliferation of AI. Global change was an evolutionary process, but this is now being led by venture capitalists, very wealthy corporations, and governments. The collective spend last year is estimated at more than $10 billion. Now, robots are very different from the psychotic robot that Arthur C. Clarke kind of popularized in the Space Odyssey. In medicine, Da Vinci surgical systems permit robots to do precision, repetitive surgeries much better than human beings can do. They can even diagnose diabetic retinopathy. They can serve as companions, they can do medical dosages, they can analyze what your problems are. Cobots are robots who work with manual labor. Earlier, robots only did machining of components. Now, cobots are completing entire assemblies with the human being an input to the whole process. Disruption of transformation with increase in AI, technology and computing power are leading to driverless cars. As we speak, Uber is testing driverless cars in Pittsburgh, and Singapore has offered itself as the next experiment. It's estimated that 10% of US jobs involve driving in some form or the other. And industrial robots have come a long way from being merely creatures of embedded software to being sophisticated instruments incorporating machine learning algorithms. This is the Farnock robot. There are 250,000 of these robots worldwide, displacing at least 500,000 jobs. There are not too many supervisory jobs created. All these robots are remote controlled from a facility at the foothills of Mount Fuji. We are not only talking about mindless, repetitive stuff. We are talking about brains. We are talking about machine learning. We are talking about self-improving algorithms. This is Google DeepMind, which beat the world Go champion in Korea a few months ago in the board game Go. I don't play Go, but I'm told it has more board positions than all the atoms in the universe. But DeepMind improved its own performance during the game by playing with itself. Now, breakthroughs have been achieved in robotics in all kinds of fields, including human taste, touch, feel, and even intuition. Now, the next big challenge is to reproduce the manipulative capabilities of the human hand in a robot. As quite a few of you would be aware, fruit picking in California is a $38 billion industry, and it employs 160,000 people per year. A lot of these jobs will be at risk when the shadow robo company in the UK teaches a robo how to pick a grape. So would many jobs the world over. The problem is that most of the research in robotics tends to view everything in the eyes of the rose prism of productivity. In 2013, Professors Osborne and Frey of Oxford produced what is easily one of the most path-taking dissertations on the subject, but they focused on a lot of stuff. But based on their data, Morgan Stanley produced this chart, which shows the probability of a particular job becoming automatable. And this chart says it all. I mean, going by this chart, and a few months ago, the World Bank President, Mr. Kim, predicted that the proportion of jobs threatened by automation in India would be as high as 69%. This was 2 months ago. I think the priorities of associations dealing with AI is perhaps understandable from their perspective, but perhaps may not comprehensively address the needs of all stakeholders. The most recent publication of the Association for Advancement of AI focused on law and ethics, security and control, verification and validation. There was less focus on economic disparities. I think the drive for robotics and their use is partly driven by aging demographics in more prosperous countries where robots can step into the breach. This is in Singapore. It's a food outlet in Singapore, which is already using robots. The situation is very different in India, where I believe we need basic employment, which is critical if you want to have the emerging workforce climb up to the next level of prosperity. Let's talk about the EU and India. What do you see common on this slide? Everything is common. The only difference, as I said earlier this morning, we were created overnight by the British, and the EU is still struggling through maybe 30 years of debate. But we have very similar characteristics, different regions, different peoples, different awareness, prosperity, and we also have continuous fiscal transfers to the poorer states. We have 12 million people joining the workforce annually, and close to 60% are school dropouts. We also include engineers who cannot be employed. McKinsey studies suggest the same is true to a lesser extent in the EU. 20% of the younger generation is not equipped with even basic skills in literacy, mathematics, certainly not in IT, as my colleague on the panel remarked earlier. And the European Centre for Development of Vocational Training suggests that the EU is not only facing age and skills obsolescence, but also a skills mismatch, even where prime-age workers are concerned. There's a lot of existing collaborations between India and the EU. They're doing good work. But I think we now need a focus, not just on the existing plane of work, but a dedicated focus on projecting the level of automation in specified sectors of the economy, and to come up with a plan to understand their effect on employment. The point is that the skills required in a digital age are very different. It is not just traditional subjects like science and mathematics. You need ICT, you need media literacy, you need flexibility, you need adaptability. the skill for which you have trained may not be required by the time you finish your training. And this is where I go back to an author called Jerry Kaplan, who's done a very good thesis on much of what we are doing, and actually we are doing it in India. One is the sequential system of education, which is no good because what you learn has become obsolete. The second is what Kaplan calls a job mortgage system, where a prospective employer commits to employment of an individual subject to that individual gaining the necessary skill sets. Our institution, working with Government of India, has used this model, and we have trained and placed in employment more than 1.6 million people in the last 4 years. So we need a new approach to these challenges. You must appreciate that it is difficult to conceive of a society being at peace with itself if a large proportion of the population is either unemployed or unemployable. Certainly you can get a passport faster. So what? I mean, 99% of the people in India don't have a passport. 99% of the people in the US don't need a passport. That's the difference. So let's take an approach to these challenges. I think we need to weave together, integrate vocational training with the educational system. And here I have some specific suggestions. In India, we have created the ecosystem of a new established Ministry for Skills by Prime Minister Modi. We've got the National Skill Development Commission. We've got Niti Aayog, which is a pretty well-regarded think tank. It has been and does some forward thinking. I think these two organizations need to be the chosen counterparties for a designated institution of the EU to grapple with on this subject, on what happens to verticals, because when we have unemployment in Bihar, the people go to Tamil Nadu. When you have unemployment in Southern Europe, people go to Northern Europe. So it's a problem which is identical, but maybe of a different dimension. And the second is to build resilience to skills obsolescence through a partnership with industry, the way we have practiced on Kaplan's model. Now, there are a lot of people in India who can contribute to this, very many organizations. And amongst all these others, our institution has the requisite ability and the aspiration to partner with EU institutions and corporates for this purpose. The studies by European Centers of Vocational Training have suggested that at least 20% of the entry-level workforce in the EU require basic training. We are well equipped to provide it in a very cost-competitive mode. We need much higher grade skills trainings. And we are having a huge focus on urban regeneration, mainly because the voting has now come to the urban areas. We have smart cities. We have a lot of European companies grappling with the problem of coming to smart cities and delivering the goods. What we really need, or what the European companies need, is a place where they can showcase their technologies and the skills needed to implement those technologies, to maintain those technologies. You need to consider promoting centers of excellence. Now you can do that all over India on a pan-India basis. These are some of the sectors of vocational training that we are currently running. They are empty at night. It's not a big deal to create centers of excellence in these kind of establishments. They're very modern, very well connected, and they're doing useful work. But unless something like this is done as a proactive measure by European companies and the EU, how will the EU, without a champion which aggregates all the sub-technologies together, how will they win a smart city contract on a holistic basis? And India is open for business. But the Japanese come in a convoy, so do the Germans, so do the Americans. We don't have an EU convoy, and believe me, there is technology all over the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patsakti, for that very interesting presentation. We'll wind up in a minute. I just want to add one bit of information about the skills that is a cooperation between Europe and India that Mr. Patsakti talked about. There is a conference being organized in New Delhi with precisely this aim on November 21 and 22, which will bring the best that EU has to offer in skilling to willing Indian partners, both in the policymaker government level and also at private level. So hope to see some of you there. More on this later, but now we'll conclude the session, this very interesting session, which had a lot from financial perspectives, from the industries perspective in India, and also the DG Connect's role in leveling the field. Would you like to add something? Just very quickly.
I just wanted to add something which comes back in the discussion here today, and that is the fact that you said EU has no. EU is 28 member states. EU is united in under an umbrella, or these 28 member states. Maybe soon to go 27 and pretty soon 28 again, maybe, depending on who is joining next time. I mean, you cannot see us as if we are EU and EU is one. That is for clear. Sometimes it is the member states that act. EU is not a federal country or a federal state. But we are something in between an international organization and a federal state. So I think that's very important to bear in mind. I think, unfortunately, and now I'm critical towards the United Kingdom, but simply say the discourse and the way that has been discussed in the United Kingdom, it is clear that it very often, and that was said before here today, it's actually very often that is the perspective that comes through in India. Of natural reasons, as somebody said, half of the exports and imports from the European Union comes from the old colonial state. But the EU is 27 other member states, including this fantastic country where we are right now. And I think what would be very nice in the future is that we try to build, and this is, of course, a very important work for us in the European Union with our people in Delhi, is to actually make it clear that the European Union is these 28 member states together, and we need a better coordination amongst those member states to make it clear in Delhi that we are one for many subjects and for the majority of the things. But typically this issue that we'll be talking about here today, digitalization of industry, is of course each and every member state has its views and its ways. What the European Union do is we put an umbrella of it all, and we try to see to it that we actually can interact so that the 28 member states gets the very best results of their own. I just wanted to add that because it is a coming theme always when we discuss the European Union with India. It is as if it is 28 plus 1, and it is not what I would like to see. Thank you.
I think it's quite clear to us now that it's all together. And now I would invite us to go to lunch, and we'll have our next session at 14:15 sharp. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.